For the first time in decades, Canadians from coast to coast, immigrants who have been here 20, 30, 40 years plus are all wondering the same thing. What happened to Canada? Why can't my kids get employed? Why can't I find employment? And how come there's this massive influx of temporary foreign workers? And I think now more than ever, politicians, business leaders, they're all coming to terms with this fundamental change. And I think many are realizing that this patchwork that we've used to help fill labor shortages have kind of gone off the rails a little bit. And now honest working Canadians can't find employment, and this will continue to be an issue if not addressed meaningfully. Okay, so before I get into the stats, just a friendly reminder, if you haven't hit like, subscribe, definitely do that, and subscribe to my newsletter. I'm really hoping that this is the place where we as Canadians can have open and honest conversations about the issues that are affecting us that our governments and media are not talking about. So like, share, and subscribe. So just this year, Angus Reid did a poll, and it found that 61% of Canadians feel like temporary foreign workers is hurting Canadian job prospect. And 54% said that they're actively damaging the labor market as well. Surprisingly, on this channel, I've covered the Canadian Chamber of Commerce lobbied the government for more temporary foreign workers, but even they are now saying to slow down and take stock. In fact, just last month in September 2025, they wrote a letter calling for a, quote, meticulous review of the temporary worker system because, quote, there are a few ways to identify how and where people are working. I'm sure all of you can relate, but when we were all younger, 16, 17, 18, our first jobs were, social skills development as well. We were connecting with our friends, making new ones. We were learning the importance of work and how important that is and how much a $20 bill means. And I just think if you're 16 years old now in any one of our major cities looking for work and you can't find it and you're left at home living with your parents, that's just a recipe for disaster if you're not occupying your mind with something to do. And I'm sure many of us from our first jobs gained vital skills that would serve us well in subsequent career paths. But right now, youth unemployment is 14.5% nationwide. And as I've mentioned in my last video, in Peel Region, it's almost 20%. Conservative MP Michelle Rempel-Garner even said, not long ago, young Canadians could gain skills in entry-level jobs and build a future, but that deal has broken down. So I mentioned the youth unemployment rate at 14.5%. I just want to mention that in the first half of this year, the government has handed out over 100,000 temporary work permits. Now you might be asking, Christopher, how do these two correlate? Well, they correlate because many temporary foreign workers are finding themselves in the entry-level food service delivery jobs that most Canadians' first jobs would be typically in. Even Premier David Eby in British Columbia stated, the explosion of temporary work permits are now filling low-wage jobs and entry-level opportunities for youth are shrinking. All right, so this is a tension I want to pose because I still am struggling to figure out where the answers are. So many business leaders will say things like most, young Canadians don't want the jobs that temporary foreign workers fill. Night jobs, night shifts, remote work sites, entry-level food service. But I beg to differ. I think that if you were to ask Canadians if these were the jobs for their young people, would their young people apply? And I think they would. And I think many parents would be in favor of their kids working, entry-level food service just to get them earning some kind of income. Night shifts might be tough with school, I get that. Remote work sites might be tough, of course, if you don't have a car. But, kids are different, and I think different parents would approach these in different ways. But there's a lot of Canadians that are willing to work, and it seems like they've already been written off before they can even apply. I just want to mention this too, that I've been trying to find this data, but the Bank of Canada has stated that the pay gap between temporary foreign workers and Canadian-born employees has gone from 9% in 2014 to over 22% by 2023. So clearly there's an added incentive to hiring temporary foreign workers because of suppressed wages. I don't have the data, say for a Tim Hortons and what they actually pay their workers, but I imagine on the aggregate, they pay them much lower than what they would pay Canadians. Again, that is my assumption and my opinion. I don't have stats to back that up. I only have the Bank of Canada report. Now, this is what's also interesting. The government is starting to backpedal on their embrace of temporary foreign workers. By 2026, the number of temporary foreign workers are to be cut by half, and clearly the government is sensing that Canadians are noticing massive changes and they want to make sure that there's an equilibrium that is struck. But the bigger question to me is, although the government is backpedaling, how crazy is it that they went down this path at lightning speed? No one really said anything about it, and they just continued ticky-boo until Canadians kicked up a fuss. Like, to me, that's the odd part about this. Like, weren't they thinking about the impact this would have on local communities and displacing Canadian workers? And why wouldn't the government, who should be thinking about Canadians first, not put Canadians first in this instance? Something else that's really worth noting. Angus Reid did a poll and it found that support for temporary foreign workers to give them a path towards citizenship dropped from 36% to 30%. This means that Canadians are seeing the game for themselves and are saying that, hang on, like, this system didn't work. And as a result, we had to do a lot of things to come here and become citizens. This temporary foreign worker, not really knowing the language, not trying to assimilate, that can't be your ticket to get full citizenship to Canada. So I want to end this with a personal story. My parents came here in the 1980s and raised my sister and I just east of Toronto. We fully adapted to Canada and Canadian lifestyle. I grew up in Canada, I learned hockey, all the things. And so it pains me greatly when I see newcomers who look like me, who don't want to integrate and don't want to socially adapt to Canada and expect permanent residency or a pathway to citizenship. That can't happen. That's not part of the social contract in Canada. Your ability to join Canada as a citizen and a contributing member shouldn't just be based on economics. It has to be also based on your willingness to adapt and adopt Canadian cultural values and ways of life. That's a binding contract, and it runs against and counter to multiculturalism for a good reason. Multiculturalism, to me, is the ability for cultures to come practice their religions and faiths and heritage without persecution. But multiculturalism fails to address the integration of newcomers into a dominant culture. And we have to integrate into the dominant culture. That's the only way this country is going to work. And if it doesn't, there is going to be festering xenophobia and racism underneath the surface that may very well undo the one thing that separates Canada from the rest of the world, and that's our acceptance and openness to immigration. So I'd love to know what you think. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll catch you